Recently, Nikki began to take her son Mark to her work. This was only possible because it was summer, otherwise he would have been at school. "Mum, will we have many orders today? Yesterday we had too few. The boss will nag you again," Mark asked timidly. Nikki gave a self-conscious smile. "Who knows, son? We take what comes our way. It's like fishing. Sometimes you catch a lot, sometimes nothing at all." Mark sighed sadly, pulling out a small notebook from his pocket. He diligently noted down all the orders, including street names. No one understood why he did this. It was his unique way of keeping accounts. At just 9 years old, Mark always sat up front in a special child car seat. Safety was paramount, although he would have been better off at home. But there was no one to look after him. Nikki had separated from her husband a couple of months ago, but they hadn't officially divorced yet. Nikki's car was hard to miss with its bright green paint, a stark contrast to the standard yellow. She named it Cucumber and drove around the city accepting all orders. Whether the destination was near or far, it didn't matter, as long as the engine's steady hum was pleasing to her ears and the wheels were immune to nails and potholes. At that moment, Mark, sitting on Nikki's right, suddenly perked up and pointed out the window. "Mum, look, there's a man hailing a cab. See him with the backpack, on the side of the road." Nikki slowed down and scrutinized the potential customer. She did this not to assess his financial standing, but to avoid picking up a passenger in a state of severe inebriation. She had experiences of passengers who, intoxicated, would keep changing their destination and ultimately wouldn't have a cent on them for payment. However, this man on the roadside seemed sober. Admittedly, he wasn't dressed very well. He wore a nondescript windbreaker, old jeans and a baseball cap with a broken visor. His worn-out sneakers were in dire need of replacement. He also had a massive backpack. What could he be carrying in it? "Mum, let's pick him up. I can see he's good," Mark remarked. Nikki smiled and pulled over to the curb. Over time, she had started to trust her son's instincts. Mark had a knack for categorizing passengers into good and not so good without any errors. It was unclear how he did it. Perhaps a child's soul is more perceptive and easily attuned to the positive or negative vibes people emit. Noticing he had been spotted, the stranger with the backpack approached the car and opened the front passenger door. "Hello, sir," Mark greeted with a smile. The man froze in surprise. "Please have a seat in the back. By the way, where are you headed?" Nikki asked, still smiling. "Thank you. I need to go to the notary's office," he responded, returning her smile. "All right," Nikki corrected him. "Please make yourself comfortable. I know where it is." The man carefully removed his backpack from his shoulder, placed it on the seat, and then sat down. Nikki started the engine, noticing her passenger's peculiar appearance. He resembled a vagabond, yet he was headed to the notary's office. Life can indeed be unpredictable. On the journey, he remained calm, barely participating in conversation. Instead, he focused on his backpack, as if it contained something of great importance. Accepting his silence, Nikki slightly turned up the radio to listen to the local news. The wave of information always relaxed her and boosted her mind. Soon the notary's office came into view. Nikki parked the car in the lot and was about to announce the fare when she noticed something peculiar. Another taxi from her service had arrived. The surprise turned into disgust when her ex-husband Lance emerged from the car with his new girlfriend. Meanwhile, her passenger exited her car but asked her to wait for him, to which she agreed. Nikki knew Lance had seen her too. Her car was the only one of its kind in the city, quite noticeable. "Ah, Nikki's here. Did you bring the heir? Is he the one who inherited the ranch in the village?" Lance called out. Nikki, ignoring her husband's comment, began to clean the side view mirror meticulously. "Hey, isn't your name Johnny Tang?" Lance asked her passenger bluntly. Nikki's customer jolted and looked at the stranger in surprise. "Yes, Johnny Tang. May I ask what this is about?" Lance smirked. "Relax, I mean no harm. You were bequeathed a ranch to you in the village. Have you heard about it?" Johnny shook his head. No, I know nothing about it. The notary contacted me 2 days ago and asked me to meet him today. Well, that's quite surprising, but as they say, ignorance can be worse than theft. Have you never heard of Mr. Havens? Lance asked, amazed. No, I haven't. I've never heard that name before, replied Johnny, his voice wavering. At that moment, Nikki felt a pang of sympathy for her passenger. He was tall and statuesque, yet unassuming and quiet. What a strange combination. Lance is just making fun of him, Nikki thought, before speaking up. Lance, stop teasing him. There's nothing funny about this. The man is here to see the notary. What business is it of yours? And why are you even here? Surprised, Lance raised an eyebrow. What do you mean, why am I here? I'm an heir to Mr. Havens too. I've been taking care of him for months, along with Rachel. I have every right to his house and real estate. Nikki swiftly retorted. And how do you know that Johnny is among the heirs? Have you already been to the notary? You just arrived. Lance smirked. Of course I have been. And I even had time to consult. I was merely waiting for this vagabond, who is, in fact, the reason for all of this. If he wasn't involved, I would have inherited everything long ago. Instead, they spent days looking for him, until they found him living like a hermit in a shabby house on the outskirt of the town. Nikki got in the car, avoiding her ex-husband's gaze. The inheritance of her customer didn't bother her. Her priority was ensuring he was content with the cab service. Meanwhile, Lance started to display affection towards his mistress in front of Nikki, clearly trying to provoke her. However, Nikki ignored him and focused on the flower bed in front of the notary's office. 5 minutes later, Johnny emerged from the building holding a large folder and what appeared to be house keys. Here comes the heir apparent. How did you win over that old man and inherit such wealth? Rachel and I only got a house in the suburbs and an apartment downtown. Yet you received the ranch, land, and all the equipment. Lance ranted. Johnny looked at him with a puzzled expression before heading towards Nikki's car. In fact, he himself did not know why he got this inheritance. He had simply been summoned to a notary's office and informed that an unknown man named Mr. Havens had left him a ranch. The conditions of the will specified that he could neither sell nor give the ranch away. Upon seeing Johnny leaving the notary's office, Nikki sighed with relief. She was finally free from the sight of her ex-husband's arrogant face. Suddenly she noticed her son untying the man's backpack. "Mark, what are you doing? That's not ours. How could you?" Nikki scolded. At that moment, Johnny opened the door and saw Mark with the backpack. The man smiled awkwardly. "Have you satisfied your curiosity, buddy?" Mark looked at the passenger excitedly. "Yes, sir. And what's in it? A puppy or a kitten?" Johnny shook his head and opened the door. "Well, let's hope this doesn't scare you. It's not a kitten or a puppy, but a real wolf cub." "A wolf cub?" Mark gasped in surprise. "Yes, a wolf cub. I found him in the forest. Poachers had shot his mother, and he was lying not far from her, whimpering for help. I buried his mother and took him with me in my backpack," Johnny explained. Nikki peered into the backpack with astonishment, finding a wild animal looking back at her with sparkling eyes. "How does he breathe in there? It must be hot for him, isn't it?" she asked, concerned. Johnny smiled. "No, I made holes and didn't tie the neck tightly, so he's warm and cozy. I'm not sure what to do with him next, but I'll figure it out." "Sir, can I hold the backpack while we drive? I really want to look at the wolf cub," Mark pleaded. Johnny nodded. "Yes, but don't bother him too much. He gets nervous and licks his nose when he's excited. If you see that, you'll know Wolfie is very excited." Nikki looked at Johnny with doubt. "What if he bites? He's a wild animal." "No, he won't bite. His teeth are still small, and he can't even eat solid food." Relieved, Nikki started the engine. Lance and Rachel watched the car leave with a hateful look. then passionately embraced each other again. Deep within, Lance was consumed by black envy. He was jealous that some drifter had inherited the old man's ranch. He and Rachel had taken care of him for months and expected a more generous reward. Lance discovered an opportunity by chance when he saw a newspaper ad. An elderly man was seeking a nurse or a couple to live in his house and assist with household chores. Initially, Lance didn't think much of it, but learning that the man was a wealthy farmer, he realized this could be a lucrative opportunity. Day by day, as he cared for Mr. Havins, Lance patiently awaited his fortune, hoping he and Rachel would become the rich heirs. The elderly farmer, to his credit, had told the couple that if they stayed until his last days, he would include them in his will. "That's a fortune. I heard he has a vast ranch on the north of the state. I wish it were mine. We could sell it or rent it out," Rachel mused. Lance agreed. "Yes, it will be ours. Who else could he give it to? If he had someone else, he wouldn't need our help. Do you think he would have placed an ad otherwise?" "No, he's alone. That's why he's resorting to this, so he doesn't die alone." Naturally, Johnny Tang had not even guessed about all this, and only found out today when the notary actually handed him the documents for his right to own a huge rural homestead located outside the city. As Mark watched the wolf cub in his backpack, Johnny worriedly pondered his next move. How will I be received on this ranch? Will the employees ridicule me, see me as a gold digger? I didn't want this inheritance. I didn't even know the deceased. Why am I involved in all this? On the other hand, what's wrong with starting over? Maybe I should become a farmer and get my life back on track. Johnny pondered, unsure of where to go next. Nikki didn't ask him about his thoughts. She drove aimlessly through the city, hoping he would make the right decision on the way. Suddenly, her walkie-talkie squawked. She glanced at Johnny and asked, "Where are we headed? My dispatcher is calling. Probably with another job. If you need to go somewhere, I can tell them I'm busy." Johnny hesitated. The folder in his hands felt like a hot potato. He also had the ranch's keys in his jeans pocket. He met Nikki's gaze and said, "Could you take me to that village? I want to see the ranch." Nikki smiled. "Of course I can. I've been there before. It's a beautiful place with a river and woods nearby. I think the wolf cub will like it there. You're planning to let him go, aren't you?" Johnny shook his head. "No, I haven't decided yet. He's small, he'll die without his mum. I feed him milk and bread soaked in broth." "Do wolves eat bread, sir?" Mark asked in astonishment. "I've seen them catch hares or quail." Johnny smiled. "Adult wolves eat meat, but their cubs eat milk." "So does he have a name? How do you call him?" Mark continued to bombard the passenger with questions. Nikki looked reproachfully at her son, but then dismissed it, allowing him to continue the conversation with the grown man. Johnny pondered. "What's his name? I don't know myself. Maybe you can help me." Mark's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Why don't we call him Fang? Fang is the hero of a story about a wolf that lived in the forest. Although it was in Alaska. Well, never mind. Let us have our own Fang." Johnny smiled. "Great, I don't mind. Let it be Fang." His conversation with Nikki and Mark noticeably lifted his mood, and Johnny realized he wasn't so lonely now. At least he would enjoy the company for this short distance. Nikki watched the road, marveling at the twists of fate that had transformed Johnny from a poor man into a wealthy heir. I wish someone would give us a house in the countryside, so Mark and I could live there comfortably, she thought. But we have to rent an apartment and deal with rapidly increasing rent rates. The road to the ranch was in poor condition, riddled with potholes that made it difficult to concentrate. "What a terrible road! I've seen bad ones before, but this—" Johnny mumbled. All this time, Mark held a backpack with a playful wolf cub inside. As the settlement appeared in the distance and Johnny anxiously glanced at it, he suddenly became so excited that he could hardly control himself. Probably it was akin to what a person feels when he or she has received some significant and very valuable gift, at least once in his or her life. For some reason, he instantly liked the village. It felt as though he was an integral part of this place, a single cog in its mechanism. "I wonder where the ranch is?" Johnny asked. Nikki shrugged and decided to ask the locals. She rolled down the car window and addressed a boy playing in a sandbox near a house. "Hi, do you know where the ranch is?" The boy looked at the stranger with curiosity and replied, "A ranch? Ah, you have to go straight down this street and don't turn and you'll come to a huge gate. That's where it is." "Thanks, buddy. Here, have a candy for your help." Nikki smiled, offering him some caramels from her pocket. The boy happily accepted the candy and immediately popped one into his mouth. Nikki drove in the direction he suggested. Soon, just as the boy said, they found themselves in front of a massive grey gate. Behind it was, presumably, the ranch. After thinking for a moment, Nikki beeped 3 times and looked furtively at her passenger, whose eyes were literally shining with intense inner excitement. The sound of shuffling footsteps approached, and a man of about 70, grunting with effort, slowly opened the gate. Before Nikki, Mark and Johnny, a ranch appeared, bordered on 3 sides by verdant fields and lush gardens. A quaint wooden house with a tiled roof stood guard at the outskirts, marking the boundary of this haven of fertility and comfort. Haystacks were scattered across the yard, and various pieces of agricultural machinery were visible. Chickens scurried around the property, geese cackled while searching for worms under currant bushes, and a dog lounged lazily by the gatehouse, keeping a watchful eye on its surroundings. It seemed the ranch was a sanctuary of tranquility, its silence broken only by the occasional mooing of cows and clucking of hens. Behind the residential buildings lay vast fields where people worked, resembling toy soldiers from a distance. To the left was a lush forest that naturally caught the eye. "Mum, it's beautiful here, look!" Mark exclaimed in amazement. Nikki fondly looked at her son, admiring his keen observational skills. "Well, Johnny, we have arrived," she said, subtly shifting the conversation. Startled, the man reached into his pocket to get some money. "Yes, I'll pay for everything, please. Take this. It should be enough for your return trip." Nikki, realizing he had given almost twice the necessary amount, blushed. "I can't accept your last money. It's too much. Please take it back," she said. In response, Johnny just gestured, insisting she take it. "Use it to buy something for your son. I'm a farmer now. I'll have money soon." Tears welled up in Mark's eyes. "Are we leaving already? I thought I could play with Fang a bit more. He'll miss me, and Johnny will be too busy to care for him while working in the fields." Nikki glanced at Johnny, hoping for reassurance or the right words. Johnny smiled. "Don't worry about it, buddy. If you like, you can come and visit me on the weekends. Fang will be glad to see you. He's growing up fast, but when he's a teenager, I'll probably let him go. It's inappropriate to keep a wolf among the usual livestock." Mark looked at his mum again. "And we'll really come, promise? I know you have work, but at least on Sunday or Saturday?" All right, you little extortionist. Do I have another choice? We'll come. We'll definitely come." Nikki replied with a smile, then added, turning to Johnny, "Well, we have to leave. Good luck and prosperity." Johnny nodded curtly, took the backpack from Mark's hand and got out of the car. Johnny smiled as he watched the bright green car pull away. Just then he noticed a middle-aged man with a look of displeasure on his face coming out of one of the houses to meet him. The stranger approached Johnny and loudly exclaimed, "Good afternoon. What brings you here?" Caught off guard, Johnny stepped back. "I've come to see my ranch," he explained. The stranger, who was clearly the boss here, hesitated. "To see the ranch? It's just a ranch running smoothly like clockwork. Why are you interested?" Misunderstood as the uninvited guest, Johnny turned pale. He pulled out a folder of documents from behind. Holding it out to the stranger, he clarified, "These are the ranch's papers. I'm the new owner. I inherited it from Mr. Havins." In surprise, the stranger raised an eyebrow. He took the folder and, upon reading the first few lines, realized Johnny was telling the truth. "Ah, I see. I apologize for the misunderstanding. I'm the manager, Raymond Menz. Since Mr. Havins' passing, I've been overseeing everything. All funds have been kept in a special account, as per the former owner's instructions. So rest assured, everything at the farm is in order." Johnny smiled. "I have no doubt. I came to familiarize myself with the place before deciding on the next steps." Raymond squinted at the guest. His trained eyes immediately recognized that the man standing before him had problems with money, surviving on casual wages. The manager's lips curved into a sad grin as he thought, "I wonder what led Mr. Havins to include him in the list of heirs. Oh, the marvellous works of God." Meanwhile, Johnny looked around the farmyard and quietly asked, "Listen, Raymond, where can I stay? I've already sent the cab back. There's no one to pick me up and I'm low on money." Raymond paused, then pointed towards a small squat building that resembled a gnome's hut. "You can stay there, in Mr. Havins' house." "Thank you. Also, do you have some milk?" asked Johnny, sounding embarrassed. Unable to suppress a smile, Raymond replied as if speaking to an old friend. "Milk? What kind of milk do you want? Pasteurized or fresh?" "Any milk is fine," Johnny responded readily. "It's actually not for me. I have this—" Raymond cautiously peeked into the backpack. "Is that a puppy?" "No, not a puppy. It's a wolf cub. I found it in the forest and decided to keep it. Its mother was killed by a poacher." Raymond gave the ranch's new owner a reproachful look. "You shouldn't have brought him here," he said. "The animal is wild. It'll trouble the dogs. However, Bella just lost her puppies and she's grieving. Maybe we should try feeding it. Look, she's in the aviary." Johnny turned to the left and immediately spotted the dog, who wagged its tail in a friendly manner. "Yes, we can try," Johnny responded and cautiously approached Bella. She eyed the newcomer suspiciously and then began sniffing the air loudly. "The baby reeks of the forest. Is there any bedding with her pup's scent on it? I want to wipe the wolf cub with it." Raymond showed him a rag lying in the corner of the aviary, and Johnny wiped it well on the wolf cub. "I hope she doesn't tear him apart," Raymond voiced his concerns, but Johnny only smiled. "No, it'll be fine. See, she stopped growling and is even wagging her tail." Kneeling carefully in front of the dog, Johnny gently placed the wolfie within her reach. Bella sniffed the air loudly again, then rumbled contentedly and began to whimper softly. She must have recognized it. "She feels that he is little, so she wants to help him," Raymond remarked again. Johnny remained silent, keeping a cautious eye on the dog. Bella wagged her tail, then stood up and, as if unperturbed, began to lick the wolf cub from head to toe. Johnny smiled. Well, now she recognized him. "You're lucky, Fang. We've found you a nurturing mum." Noticing that he was about to be fed, the wolf cub rumbled invitingly and began to move his nose from side to side, searching for his foster mother's breasts. Witnessing this tender scene, Johnny couldn't keep back tears, and Raymond's eyes also grew moist. Stepping aside, he said, "Get comfortable, Johnny. If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask. You're in charge here, and I'm here to assist." Johnny waved his hand dismissively. "What are you talking about? I understand you've been working here for a long time. And who am I? A newcomer? A stranger?" After entrusting Fang to his foster mum, Johnny went to settle into the house he had been assigned. It was quite cosy inside. The house had a fragrance of herbs and something else, which stirred his appetite. "That's right. I haven't had anything to eat since this morning." The journey from the suburbs to the city catching a cab, getting here, Johnny mused. Imagine his surprise when, half an hour later, there was a knock at the door, and Raymond appeared with a tray. On it was a cup of fragrant tea and a vase full of fresh, homemade buns. Here, Johnny, my wife baked these fresh. You must be hungry after your journey, and the air here makes one twice as hungry, Raymond said. Thank you, Raymond. I sincerely appreciate it, Johnny said appreciatively, and immediately began to eat. Meanwhile, Nikki was returning to the city, rushing to complete another order. Mark sat on the right side, and he was upset because the wolf cub was left on the ranch. Mum, what if a cow hurts him? Or the goats? Do you know how mean they can be? They could gore him with their horns, Mark asked worriedly. Nikki shrugged uncertainly. I don't know. I think Johnny will take care of him. After all, he's the one who saved the cub and is fully responsible for him. Don't worry. Everything will be fine. We'll visit on Sunday. Much to Nikki's disappointment, upon their arrival in the city, it was already late, and she was advised to leave her car for check and to end her workday early. Well, we made almost nothing. At least we helped Johnny. We did something good, Mark expressed with a hint of sadness. Nikki smiled at her son and tousled his hair. On their way home, they stopped at a store where she used the money left by Johnny to buy various treats. Nikki and Mark resided in a rented ground-floor apartment, which was habitually damp and cold, particularly in autumn and winter. However, it was summer, and they could forget about these discomforts temporarily. Upon reaching her apartment door, Nikki instantly noticed 2 suitcases. One had a handle wrapped in blue duct tape, which made Nikki recognize it as her own. What is this about? Is the landlady cleaning or renovating the apartment? Why are then our things in the stairwell? Nikki pondered anxiously. As she opened the door, she came face to face with her landlady. Well, Nikki, you're moving out today. I'm sorry, but I've found new tenants who pay almost twice as much as you, and they don't have small children. Why did your Mark draw on the walls with crayon and tear the wallpaper? Now I have to cover the repair costs. Mark, candy in hand, asked, When did I draw on the walls and tear the wallpaper? I never did it. But Helen only smirked. I probably know better, don't I, kid? I come here every week when the apartment is empty and see the mess you've made. So, Nikki, I've packed your things and won't keep you. What about the rent? I paid 2 months in advance, she asked. Helen's eyebrows raised. What prepayment? It's not a prepayment. It's a deposit for the damages you caused. You broke the faucet in the bathroom, the sink in the kitchen leaks. Who's supposed to cover these repair costs? Everything was working properly when I rented the apartment to you. No, it wasn't. You're lying. The faucet in the bathroom was broken in front of you. We just didn't mention it, Mark exclaimed indignantly. Nikki looked at the landlady disapprovingly. I take it you won't give me the money? Helen shook her head negatively. No, absolutely not. Have you ever heard of depreciation? You work in a cab, you understand. I won't let anyone live here for free. So pack your bags and bear me no ill will. Perhaps we'll cross paths again. No, I'm sorry. I hope we never meet again. At least let me stay the night. It's not right to throw someone out in the middle of the night. What will we do now? Nikki replied in a trembling voice. Helen looked disapprovingly at the tenant. You should have thought of that before you turned my apartment into a mess. We didn't create any chaos. You made it up just to throw us out. Mark, who always spoke his mind, exclaimed, Leave before I call the police, shouted the landlady. Bending under the weight of 2 suitcases, Nikki stepped outside, deep in thought. And why did we go to that store to buy groceries? Now I have to carry 2 suitcases, and Mark has to carry a bag of sweets bought with Johnny's money. Nikki's gaze landed on a suburban bus, slowing down at the bus stop. She waved to the driver and shouted, "Wait, please, wait for us!" She wasn't sure if the driver heard her, so she turned to her son. "Sonny, quickly, tell him to wait for 5 minutes while I get the suitcases. Leave your bag here. Hurry!" Mark didn't need to be told twice. He dashed to the bus stop. Once inside the bus, he said to the driver, "Sir, please wait for my mum. We'll be right back. We're going to the village. We have a tame wolf cub there named Fang, and the man we know, his name is Johnny." The driver looked at the young passenger in surprise before turning off the engine. "Well, we'll wait. You have a wolf, and a tame one at that. It means a lot." His voice was full of irony, but Mark didn't notice. "Yes, that's how it is. The cobbler without boots," Nikki muttered under the weight of the suitcases. She could use her cab during the day, but now she had to carry the suitcases herself. The bus was full. The driver opened the luggage compartment for Nikki's suitcases. After paying the fare, she and her son moved to the back of the bus. Nikki was full of concerns. She didn't know where they would live now. Before she quarrelled with Lance, she lived in his apartment, but he had kicked her out 6 months ago. Lance wasn't even confused by the fact that they raised a son together and once had made plans for a happier future. Deep down, Nikki clung to the hope that Johnny wouldn't turn them away. At least, that's how it seemed. Twilight fell over the road. The bus made its slow journey along a familiar route. Nikki felt a stirring of déjà vu. Just hours before, she had travelled the same road in a bright green cab she had affectionately named Cucumber. Exhausted from the day, Mark dozed off, clutching a bag of goodies. Nikki couldn't help but smile at the sight of him, so endearing and painfully precious. And how did it happen that his own father didn't care about him? She wondered sadly. Lance, however, was unbothered by the presence of his young son. He lived for his own pleasure, never considering anyone else. Nikki chastised herself repeatedly for choosing to tie her life to such a man. But who could have predicted that the charming man she met would turn out to be so irresponsible and deceitful, caring only for himself? The road seemed to stretch on endlessly, the grey bus continuing its journey. As they neared the needed village, the bus emptied, most passengers having alighted at earlier stops. To Nikki's dismay, she found herself alone at the final station. As she was about to ask the driver to open the luggage compartment for her suitcases, the driver offered, "Listen, where do you need to go? If your destination is close to the highway, I can give you a ride. Why do you have to carry all these suitcases?" Nikki's eyes lit up with hope. "Can you take me to the ranch? There's a big gate and it's not far, about 1 kilometre approximately. I'm actually a cab driver. I was here earlier today, but my car's in for diagnostics now, so I'm left without wheels." The driver smiled. "Of course. What are you talking about, colleague? We'll be there in no time." Mark, drowsily sitting in the back of the cabin, didn't even notice when they turned off the highway and onto a dirt road that led to the ranch within minutes. "Well, here we are. Do you want me to honk?" the driver suggested. Nikki nodded. Instantly, the quiet evening of the sleeping village was broken by the loud honk of the bus. The gate was opened again by an elderly man who seemed to be the ranch's watchman. Squinting, he asked Nikki, "Are those your suitcases?" His gaze followed the departing bus. "Well, yes, mine and my son's," she replied quietly, holding her sleepy baby. "All right, come on in," the watchman said calmly. "Should I call the manager or the new master?" Nikki thought for a moment, and indeed, to whom had she come? To Johnny, with whom they had known each other for half a day? What if he doesn't care about her now, and she just left everything for a phantom hope of finding a bed within the walls of the ranch? Fortunately, Johnny appeared from the house a few minutes after the bus departed. He was delighted to see his guests. "Nikki! Mark! You've arrived! I'm glad you decided to come back," he exclaimed. Nikki lowered her eyes, embarrassed. We were kicked out of the rented apartment. The landlady didn't give us the rent money. I paid 2 months in advance. And she charged us some kind of amortization today," she responded with evident resentment. Johnny sighed sympathetically. He wondered where he could house Nikki and Mark. They couldn't all live together in the house. What would people think? "Please forgive me, Johnny, for coming at such a time," she said on, trying not to cry in front of him. "I really have nowhere to turn. I can't spend the night on the street." Johnny looked at her with undisguised tenderness and kindness. "Don't worry about it," he said. "I'll definitely think of something. Now let's go. I'll introduce you to my friends. They're good people and will help. You've helped me so much today. I was on that highway for an hour and a half, trying to hitch a ride, but nobody stopped. They probably thought I was a hobo." At that moment, Raymond emerged from one of the buildings. Seeing a young woman with a child, he frowned. Coming closer, he introduced himself politely and cautiously inquired about the situation. After listening to the confused story, the manager readily stated, "I think there won't be a problem with accommodation. You can stay in that house over there, the one with the red roof. That's where the maid used to live when Mr. Havins was still alive. The house is now empty. I'm the only one left here, along with some local workers, but they sleep at home with their families." "Thank you so much. We are truly grateful to you," Nikki said, wiping away a tear. At this moment, both Raymond and Johnny felt uncomfortable, as if they had intruded upon something deeply personal. "Johnny, where is Fang? Why can't I see him anywhere?" Mark anxiously asked, still rubbing his eyes after a sound sleep on the bus. Johnny smiled. "Here he is, my friend. He's sleeping in with Bella now. She's like a new mum for him." Mark's eyes widened with surprise. "He's with a dog? But he's a wolf, and dogs are wolves' first enemies. I've seen it in movies and documentaries. Wolves and dogs aren't comrades." Raymond hummed understandingly. "On TV, wolves and dogs aren't comrades, but it's different in real life. Hunger can drive strange alliances. If you're hungry, you might even form unlikely friendships. Bella lost her puppies because they found new families. She was grieving, refusing to eat, but when they put a wolf cub with her, she became entirely different, tender, affectionate, constantly licking the wolfie." A sweet smile played on the boy's lips. "Wow! It's great that Fang found his mum. Sure, a foster mum is better than your backpack." Johnny looked at Nikki and couldn't hold back his laughter. Raymond, meanwhile, held the house key, which he handed over to the young mother. "Here, take it. There's a switch just to the right as you enter. I've replaced the bulbs, so everything should work. There's gas in the cylinders if you want to cook, and a change of bedding in the cupboard. I think you'll figure it out." "Thank you. Of course we will," Nikki replied with a smile. After a long day of travel, she immediately made the bed, not even bothering to unpack the suitcases. Mark, too, could barely stand from fatigue, even though he had managed to nap on the bus. On their first night in the village, mother and son fell into a deep sleep. Johnny, however, couldn't sleep, no matter how hard he tried. Lying on his side, he pondered his next steps. He could ask for help from Raymond, who knew the workings of the ranch and could provide him with everything he needed. However, he wanted to immerse himself in the process, striving for independence. In addition, he still had the mocking grin of Lance's, who looked at him as if he were a vagrant asking for alms at the church. However, Johnny was far from a vagrant. He didn't own a nice house, but he lived in a small shabby house inherited from his mother. Johnny only finished school and did not go further to study. He used to take on various part-time jobs, and such a quiet life suited him well. He loved the forest and nature, and sometimes went into the wilderness for a week, living in the forest and sleeping on the ground. It seemed strange for an educated city dweller, but Johnny was happy. While Johnny pondered his future, Lance was plotting to grab the ranch off a deceased old man. "Why does he favour that bum so much?" Lance mused aloud, engrossed on the TV. "The old man gave us an apartment and a house, but this vagrant gets the ranch. I wish he'd left him the house and the ranch for us. It's a lucrative business, isn't it? Milk, eggs, meat, wheat. With the right approach, one could even become a millionaire eventually. But this vagabond will likely sell it all off and squander the money in no time. Rachel looked at her lover with a smile and said, "What should we do now? We can't just take his ranch from this tramp. It's a legal estate." "By law?" Lance retorted. "Let's think about it. How did he legally inherit it? We could sue and appeal the will. We've taken care of the old man for months. This guy shows up out of nowhere and gets everything. It's not right. We should go to court. I know someone there. For a small fee, he'll make a document claiming we've been caring for Mr. Havins for almost 20 years. "Do you think that will work?" Rachel questioned. "A will is a serious document, the final wish of the deceased. It's unarguable." Lance dismissed her concern with a wave of his hand, saying, "Enough of this dreary talk. I'll think it through and figure it out. If necessary, I'll involve the ranch manager. I could promise him a percentage of the ranch's income, and in return, he could present our Johnny Tang as a hopeless drunkard and vagrant to the court. It's impossible to entrust the ranch to such a person. We'll reveal all this in court. Then you'll see. We'll have the whole ranch in our hands." Rachel joyfully exclaimed, "You're clever. I thought there was no chance, but you, like a magician, pull out aces like rabbits from a hat." Lance merely shook his head. "Don't worry. We'll continue the fight. I wonder how Nikki got here. She probably just brought this beggar to the notary's office and doesn't really know what happened. But if she does, she's quite cunning. She must think she found her happiness among piles of trash. But we'll figure it out. The ranch will be ours, regardless." The next day, Johnny woke at dawn and went outside to observe the early morning activities on the ranch. To his surprise, it was already teeming with life. The shepherd was leading the cows to pasture. The poultry house staff were feeding their charges and refilling their water. The tractor drivers were checking the diesel levels in the fuel tanks, preparing for their day in the field. Gradually, Johnny began to feel part of this unified team. He recognized that the ranch operated like a well-oiled machine, thanks to the manager, even though he himself was clueless about the operations. He realized that he could learn it all in due time. Not immediately, but eventually. To better remember the details, Johnny pulled out a notebook from his pocket, usually used for sketching landscapes, and began noting everything he observed. He recorded how many cows went to pasture, which stayed in the stable, and how much feed was given to the birds at a time. This wasn't done out of a desire to control, but to integrate himself into the workflow as much as possible. Upon seeing the new owner with a notebook in hand, Raymond smiled. "This stranger isn't as simple and unreliable as he seemed during our first meeting. Maybe he'll do well." It so happened that, at first, Raymond didn't like Johnny. However, when Johnny pulled a small wolf cub from his backpack, Raymond's attitude towards him changed dramatically. He had a deep love for animals. He often recalled a childhood memory of finding a wolf cub in a clearing. Fearful of his stepfather's anger, he didn't dare bring it home. When he returned an hour later, the cub was gone. Since then, Raymond had been plagued by guilt for not being able to save the cub. Half a day passed unnoticed in the troubles. During the lunch break, the phone rang in Raymond's pocket. Seeing an unfamiliar number on the screen, the manager took the call. It turned out to be Lance. "Raymond, is that you?" Lance asked, his voice laced with superiority. "Yes, it's me. What's up?" Raymond responded. There was a pause before Lance launched into his proposal. As he explained his plan, Raymond's forehead furrowed with concern. Lance's proposition was shocking, but it came with a significant financial incentive. If Raymond helped Lance remove the farm's new owner, his financial status could improve greatly. Once Lance finished, Raymond responded non-committedly. "Okay, I'll think about it and call you back in a couple of days." Lance attempted to continue, but Raymond abruptly ended the call. After their conversation, Raymond secluded himself in his office and began to draft a scheme on paper. This would help him understand and make the correct decision. Primarily, he wanted to uncover the truth about why the late Mr. Havins, who was being cared for by Lance and Rachel, chose to leave the farm to Johnny. He also wondered how this stranger was involved in all this. It took Raymond just under a week to discover the truth. During this period, he constantly avoided giving Lance a definitive answer, keeping him in suspense and preventing him from executing his plan. Raymond did this intentionally, as he had long decided not to betray Johnny. During this time, he began to see Johnny in a new light. No longer was he a transient with a guilty demeanour, scraping by with odd jobs. Instead, Raymond saw a competent manager, capable of not just casting stones away, but also gathering them together when needed. Much to the manager's surprise, Nikki quickly adapted to life on the ranch as well. She began helping farm workers on her second day in the village. To her great upset, the taxi park director decided to eliminate the only female from his team, giving her bright green car to another driver. Lance, acknowledging that Raymond was unlikely to support him, tried to fabricate documents with false witness testimony, stating that Johnny Tang was incapable of managing the ranch. However, he was met with a surprise. Raymond and Johnny presented authentic documents to court, proving that Johnny Tang was the late farmer's grandson. Years ago, Mr. Havins' son Ned left home following a dispute with his parents. He fell into bad company and ended up in prison, serving almost a quarter of a century, with brief periods of freedom, before reoffending. When little Johnny was only 10 years old, Ned was killed in a prison riot. Johnny lived with his mother all the time, but when he was 16, she died as a result of a work accident. The boy thought he was alone in the world and lived as best he could, adapting to the new reality. At the same time, his grandfather didn't know anything about his existence either. It was only shortly before his death that his son's former cellmate, with whom Ned was friends, was released after serving a long sentence and visited the old man. He was the one who told Mr. Havins that his son had had a girlfriend and a son. Mr. Havins began making inquiries and soon learned all about Johnny. Unfortunately, he didn't get to see him, but he did get to redo his will. On his deathbed, Mr. Havins decided to leave his ranch to his grandson, while leaving his apartment and house to Lance and Rachel, fulfilling his promise. Lance, having suffered a fiasco, finally quarrelled with Rachel during sharing apartment and house with her. Meanwhile, Nikki finally filed for divorce, as she planned to start a new life with a more dependable man who, unlike her previous spouse, wasn't careless with their family's happiness and planned to multiply it. Raymond and Johnny became such close friends that many villagers started referring to them as brothers. When he reached maturity, Fang left for the forest, answering the call of his forest brothers in a place abundant with game and where hunters don't harm animals without good reason. Watching his joyful parents, Mark laughs heartily, eagerly awaiting the arrival of his sibling.